On a cold and rainy Thanksgiving Eve, 1971, a man using the alias Dan Cooper walked into Portland International Airport and purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Once his flight was airborne, he handed a note to a stewardess which demanded a knapsack filled with $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck ready for refueling upon landing in Seattle. If his demands were not met, he threatened to explode the aircraft with a bomb contained in his briefcase. When Flight 305 landed in Seattle, authorities provided the skyjacker with all of his demands. Cooper released everyone on board the 727 except for the flight crew and one stewardess. He then demanded the pilot fly to Mexico City. Once in the air again, Cooper ordered the stewardess to go to the cockpit. He cut cords from one of the parachutes he'd been given and used them to seal the knapsack full of money and secure it to his body. Somewhere over the southern tip of Washington state, Cooper lowered the aft stairwell of the 727 and jumped. He has never been seen or heard from again. In the 37 years since the crime, no one has been able to establish the fate of Cooper or the ransom money. Cooper has never even been identified. The official position of the FBI is Cooper did not survive the jump, but the Bureau still expresses an interest in identifying the skyjacker. Here's the original 1971 FBI composite of D.B. Cooper. Now, 1 year later, the FBI revised this sketch and included color, just to give you an idea of what a skin tone the skyjacker had. He was described as having an olive or swarthy complexion, smooth complexion. The problem with all of the FBI sketches is that the special agent who was originally in charge of the investigation has admitted that they're not very good. One stewardess who was on board Flight 305 that night had stated many times that she did not feel that this was a good sketch. So the producers of a popular television show in the 1980s commissioned a different sketch of D.B. Cooper with this stewardess dictating. Taking that new sketch and using image morphing software, I combined it with the revised 1972 FBI sketch and came up with this. D.B. Cooper can still be identified.
One fact remains. Nobody knows whether D.B. Cooper is dead or alive.
November 24th, 1971. A man buys a ticket for $18.72 for Flight 305 from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington under the name Dan Cooper.
He handed me a note and he kept looking at me.
He presents to her an open briefcase.
I saw a big battery with 6 dynamite sticks wrapped around the battery.
Cooper demands $200,000 and 4 parachutes to be brought to the plane when it lands in Seattle. Cooper releases the passengers, but keeps the flight crew on board. He receives the loot, the jet refuels, and they take off due southeast toward Mexico City, removes his clip-on tie, and makes his way to the cargo deck of the 720. He steps down to the aft opening, the plane still over Washington territory. With nerves of steel, he doesn't look back and jumps, disappearing into the stormy night.
I'm convinced at this point that I certainly have an overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence to close this case now. I do believe that the evidence is there. I'm not completely finished with my investigation. I have a little more work to do, but I think when it's all said and done, then I'm going to have a convincing case for William P. Gossett as the real D.B. Cooper.
The Mystery of D.B. Cooper. On the afternoon of Thanksgiving Eve, 1971, a man known as D.B. Cooper boarded the airline's flight number 305. When Cooper was seated, he got out a note and gave it to the flight attendant. The note stated he had a bomb and he backed up his claim by flashing his briefcase containing an explosive. The plan was set in motion and Cooper laid out his demands. The ransom loot was $200,000, 4 parachutes, and some food. When the plane landed to refuel, Cooper let all the rest of the passengers leave the aircraft, but he kept the flight crew on the plane to meet his demands. The plane was airborne with the destination being Mexico City, but Cooper never made it there. Somewhere over the northwest United States, D.B. Cooper, along with his loot, jumped out of the back of the plane with the parachutes he was given. To this day, there was no body ever found in the vast forests of the Northwest. One clue has been left. Some bills from the hijacking have been found near the evacuation spot. These dollar bills were marked by the federal authorities and then easily identified as the stolen money. This is the only unsolved plane hijacking in world history. So, where is this man?